How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and we are going to be presenting to you episode 2 in our Halloween series, which we will be covering the direct sequel to the 1978 classic Halloween, Halloween 2, and also the obscure third movie in the series that a lot of people have questions about, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. As we go through, we're going to do like we did in the first video, and if you haven't watched that, go ahead and go ahead, come on. Just go watch it.
Go watch it real quick.
But, after you're done with that, hop back into here. And we're going to be doing pretty much the same thing, a little bit scaled back, though, a little bit more laid back. And just kind of give you the facts and see what was up with these two sequels. So, strap yourselves in for another episode of Too Much Candy. Halloween 2, as mentioned, is a direct sequel to the first film. Just to give a little heads up here, there will be spoilers for Halloween 1, Halloween 2, and Halloween 3 as we move along, so it's been a long time since these movies were released, but if you don't want any spoilers, leave now and we won't hate you for it. But continuing on with that, Halloween 2, as mentioned, is a direct continuation of the story of the cliffhanger that was set up at the end of Halloween 1. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were the writers for this movie and decided that they wanted to continue telling just that whole story as one big grandiose thing. The budget for the movie itself was 10 times more of the original movie, being $2.5 million, and domestically grossed $25 million at the box office. Internationally, it grossed $38 million, which might have only been half of what the first movie made itself, but given that was enough profit on what was actually invested with the studio, it was definitely enough money for them to continue on and thinking that there was more life in this franchise. John Carpenter, the writer of Halloween 2, along with Deborah Hill, has gone on to say that the film, really didn't need to happen, and he thought the first one was exactly what it should have been. But his writing process for this movie, as he has said, mainly dealt with a lot of beer, sitting in front of a typewriter, and saying, "What the f*** am I doing? I don't know." Doesn't really sound like he was into it, but as we mentioned in the last movie, if you throw enough money at the guy, he'll pretty much do anything with the franchises that he's created. Erwin Yablans, who we also mentioned was the producer in the first movie, was really pushing for the sequel. That being said, it was kind of shoehorned with the whole idea that Michael and Laurie, again spoilers, are brother and sister here. If you go back and watch the first movies, it doesn't really feel like going from the first one to second one, you get that type of vibe from what the dynamic is between the two characters. In the first one, Michael is really coming off as this embodiment of evil, and that he is just methodically trying to take these people out for whatever reason, which is almost the most haunting part of the whole movie. And in the second one, now that it's kind of put out there that he is the brother of Laurie Strode, it almost takes away a little bit of the magic of that. And it gives this almost weird grounded tone to the movie that, while it may have been a good idea at the time in John Carpenter's head, it really was something that kind of brought the franchise down in a lot of people's minds. This went on to be the crux of the entire franchise up until pretty much the reboot in 2018, and also, as we'll discuss later, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Halloween 2 was actually directed by Rick Rosenthal. Now, you would think that John Carpenter and Deborah Hill writing this sequel would want to just do that again and put their own spin on it and all of that, but John Carpenter refused to direct this sequel. Rick Rosenthal did the best that he could to pick up the tone and the pace of the first film, but kind of took it in a little bit of a different direction. John Carpenter has gone on to say, though, that while he did not want to direct the sequel, he still wanted to give the chance to another director to strike gold. Rick Rosenthal himself, being part of the LA actors community and things of that nature, found some acquaintances at the Beverly Hills Playhouse that he knew that would make great character actors for this movie. The only recurring actors, or returning actors as we should say, in this movie are Dr. Loomis, Laurie Strode, and Sheriff Brackett. Everyone else was new, including Michael Myers himself, and he was played by a different actor. That actor's name was Dick Warlock, and if I didn't know any better, I would assume he was an adult actor.
Oh, brother, this guy
When you look at how the movie turned out, the story that was presented, how it ended, the upped gore, just to pretty much keep up with the slashers at the time, the higher body count for Michael, which, pretty much was to just give him more screen time, and all the other little intricacies that were set up in this movie, you would assume that that could have been the end of the story for Michael and Laurie, which at the time it was. Another spoiler here, at the end of the movie, Michael is actually burned alive in the hospital that he's chasing Laurie around in. There was a very, you could say, claustrophobic feel to the movie with the setting that it gave, and there were a lot of beats that worked for it, but because of the actual just kind of flipping of the script, of the suspense that was in the first one and the gore presented in the second, a lot of people, including critics, thought it was uninspired and a little bit of a money grab. Now, that is something that when you do look at it, again, back to back, if you're just watching these movies, you can kind of see where they're coming from on that. Standalone, though, it is a pretty good 80s horror slasher, and it is a movie that is worth going back and watching. While doing research for this video, I did unfortunately come across something that was inspired in real life by these movies. Now, not to subvert from the video too much, but I did want to, kind of bring this to light, and if you guys are into this type of thing, leave a comment below and let us know, and maybe we could do a little video series on not only this, but other things of this nature. In 1982, there was a crime committed dubbed the Halloween 2 murders. Richard Delmer Boyer murdered an elderly couple in El Monte, California. His defense was that he suffered hallucinations brought on by the movie while watching it under the influence of PCP, marijuana, and alcohol. There was a parallel between the murders in the movie and his heinous act, but the jury did not buy that defense. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Unfortunately, to this day, he remains alive on death row. Again, if you are into true crime or anything like that, leave a comment below and let us know if you'd like to do a video series about real life inspired murders and things of that nature along the horror lines, and we'll do our best to do those videos showing respect to the victims and not trying to glorify the people carrying out these heinous acts. All those facts being presented, and it may come off as a little negative with what we've said so far, we do want to be clear that Halloween 2 is one of the better slasher films that you're going to find from the early 80s. While it couldn't live up to the predecessor of Halloween 1978, it did a great job with the gore, the body count, the claustrophobic feel of the setting, and a lot of other things that it did with the actual film itself. Now, again, as I mentioned, couldn't live up to the first Halloween movie. And if you didn't see our video on that masterpiece, go ahead, exit the video now, check that out, and then hop back in with us as we explore Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. What can be said about this movie that hasn't already been said? For those unaware, this is the sequel without Michael Myers. And if that doesn't already sound odd enough, hear me out on the plot of this movie. There's a crazed toy maker who wants to usher in the Celtic tradition of Samhain, and by doing this, he's creating masks with medallions on the back that have a piece of Stonehenge in them. Now, these masks are geared towards children. And with these masks, when the children are wearing them, they'll be watching some kind of jingle on the television that will activate the piece of Stonehenge, turn it into a laser, melt their heads, and then somehow summon insects and snakes that come out of the children's bodies and necks and kills the people around them. If this sounds pretty odd, you would be spot on. So everything about this film, from the electronic score, to the acting, to the special effects, to pretty much the whole tone of the movie, was just a fever dream of an experience. It threw a lot of people for a loop when they were there actually watching it in person, and it really just was almost off-putting in a way. Now, there is an explanation from the director, who was another new director at the time, Tommy Lee Wallace, and this is what he said. "It is our intention to create an anthology out of the series, sort of along the lines of Night Gallery or The Twilight Zone, only on a much larger scale, of course." Now, this ties into what was just said before, where, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill did want to make movies based off of the Halloween holiday and not just have it focused on one set of characters. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill only agreed to be a part of this movie pretty much as producers as long as it wasn't a direct sequel to Halloween 2. As mentioned with Tommy Lee Wallace's quote, they really wanted this to be an anthology series. At this point, they had already explored the boogeyman and pure evil with Michael Myers, and so pivoting to Samhain in this one, and then furthering that with other kind of rituals and lore about the holidays, really what they were trying to go for. As far as they were concerned, Michael was dead and the story with Laurie was over, and they really wanted to move on from that. Ultimately, this proved to be a false hope. The movie itself, on the same $2.5 million budget that Halloween 2 had, only grossed $14.4 million at the box office. To this day, it is the lowest grossing film in the entire franchise. The marketing of the movie also failed to emphasize how different this entry was compared to the other two movies. With a shift in almost every aspect of what made Halloween, Halloween, this almost was a nail in the coffin for the promising franchise. People waited a whole movie to see Michael appear, only to have confusion and anger wash over them by the end credits. I know personally when I heard the third one didn't have a minute, I skipped over it for years. Once I did finally get around to watching it and giving it the shot it deserved, I realized the almost genius that came with leaving out the main villain from the first two movies. I at that point wanted to see the fallout of the ending and how that might move forward, but there was never a continuation of the story told. All we were left with was a one-shot story in a franchise built off of a family lunatic and the idea of an unstoppable force of evil. In closing, Halloween 2 and 3 can leave you scratching your head in bewilderment of how these sequels could take such a visceral and haunting idea of the first movie and turn them into what they did. Halloween 2 being a little bit more of a gore fest and just kind of showing you the brutality of what the boogeyman is capable of, and then Halloween 3 not even following any of that, but still showing you a crazed murderer who isn't wearing a mask but is selling them, is just crazy. But being able to go in, do a deep dive myself, do the research, and find a new appreciation for these films through that research was very enlightening on how, back in the day, I can understand why they got the rap that they did, but looking back on them now, decades removed, they are great pieces of work. The artistry put into them, the filmmaking, the cinematography, just everything worked for what they were trying to do in that time. And again, while back in the day it might not have seemed like it was a great bet, right now, looking back on it, they're fantastic entries into this franchise. Giving all of that tonally, I just want to say that, I would recommend going out and watching them. That's just in my opinion, but I'm also a huge fan of the franchise itself. I'm excited for the new movie coming out this year, and doing the research on this just helped reopen my eyes to how much love I have for horror in general, and how it's been able to be almost an outlet for me in ways that I never knew possible. So thank you very much for watching. We appreciate all the support, all the love. Make sure to like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all of our social medias, and at the end of the day, never forget, don't eat too much candy.